Mr. Judice, is Mr. Grashwitz looking to enter the meeting? There. So we have, I assume, our one public that's joined us after the executive. So we have 3 contract issues. 2 we can resolve relatively quickly, and then we'll get into our third, which I think should hopefully be resolved relatively quickly. So the first is, can I have a motion to accept an amended court contract with Lebanon Borough, allowing the borough to keep their municipal zoning violation fees? No other portion of the contract would be changed, and Bethlehem still retains all other fees.
Make that motion to amend that contract for that zoning issue alone.
Do I have a second?
Second that for the zoning issue alone.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstain? Okay. And then can I have a motion to accept the shared service agreement for chief financial officer between Bethlehem Township and Lebanon Borough?
Make that motion.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Okay. And then the third issue is the easement for Mr. Grashwitz. I'm going to preface what we discussed and then have you share some input. So this is a essentially a right of way or paper street for development that will never be built. That's now your preserved farm. The cleanest and easiest thing, we represent the township, so we respect. I'll preface, and I said this even in executive. We appreciate your farm and you as part of our Bethlehem Township community, but our goal or our main objective is to preserve and protect the township. So the cleanest and best thing for us to do is we would like to vacate that right of way, which then sets it back to the 2 properties on either side. And then it would be up to you to make an agreement with those property owners for a private easement. But I did offer when we came up, before we take any action, I'd like to obviously give you the opportunity to share any input that you'd like to.
Okay, so as far as vacating, so the town would give their right up to that property to the properties that adjoin it on either side. So that's the traditional way of doing it. But because that property was left there with sole intentions to access my property, could that be vacated to me instead?
So the problem with that is that the language in the right of way is for future road connection should lot 6 be developed. And since it's not being developed, there's really no reason to build the roadway. The other problem is that it requires the roadway to be built consistent with chapter 76, which is, a very expensive roadway improvement. So that's the reason why it really doesn't work, because this right of way is contingent on the development of those back lots, and since it's preserved, there's just no need for the road.
So as far as the definition of development, is ag structures not considered development? Because being a preserved farm, yes, I cannot build houses there, but realistically, I could build farm structures in that field requesting access to Kalen Farm, which I have a right to use because I have a right of way. So what dictates what's the definition of development would be my question.
I mean, if you want to have your attorney write me a letter and put forth some legal argument, but generally what would be done is a vacation of the right of way.
Okay.
Again, you're asking the township to essentially give you the land, that would benefit you, and the neighbors may find that objectionable. And frankly, it may be a taking, because if I were the property owners, I'd say, wait a second, it's a preserved farm. It's not going to be developed as a roadway to roadway standards, and the development hasn't occurred. So I think the intention when the right of way was drafted was that it would not be just solely for agricultural use.
Okay, so despite the fact that the town intends to vacate that strip, I still have a right of way there because the town cannot legally vacate my right of way. Is that correct?
I mean, I'm willing to take another look at it, but that's not my understanding.
Okay, so then as far as using my right of way for access, what would I have to do to use the access? I have
Well,
to notify these homeowners, or
It's,
because you're
it's
changing ownership from the town to homeowners?
you'd have to discuss with the two homeowners if you could build a driveway to access in that location.
Isn't it kind of cut and dry if I have a right of way? I have a right of way. It's not a yes or no.
It's a public road is the intention. It's a dedication for a public road.
Okay. There's also a second right of way that I have that is off of the other side street. I believe it's Bog Meadow. Can we do anything with that right of way so I would have access to my farm fields?
You have to send me the easement language and I'll
Okay.
take a look at it. But
Yeah.
is that also creating a flag lot through two residential properties, or is it?
So that is at the end of the cul-de-sac. I believe the road's called Bog Meadow. It was the same idea. Because in order to preserve the farm that I purchased there, the county would not preserve it without access. And the driveway that I currently have is 16 feet. So essentially it was preserved without these. So they left another right of way off of the cul-de-sac. Was their intentions to do the same thing?
So you have two right of ways, but and we'll have to research it. So
Mhm.
were both of them were the original intention to be roadways for that development though?
As far as I know, yes. One is off the cul-de-sac and the one is what I submitted the application for. The one I submitted the application for is the one that I did because there was already a curb cut there and it's centralized to the farm, not all the way to the end.
So Mr. Grossman, and I'm sure you understand this. I'm just trying to clarify, so, if the township does anything on these roads, we're bound to bring them up to full road standards. So that's our problem, is we're not going to invest in a roadway. So we can't say, yes, you have access, because then we have to make it a road. So that's our dilemma cost wise. We want to work with you as best we can, but we can't invest in those roads. We have done this in the past and we're not bound by precedent, but we have had these paper roads in the past where they were set for developments and then they were split between the two property owners. That's typically what happens. And then, yes, it would be up to you to then go to those two property owners, and I don't know if they have a relationship with them or if they have any thoughts on your farming activity, to then create a private easement to grant access on this particular instance. The other issue on Bog Meadow, and I'm trying to do a Google Earth to take a look at it. So what I would offer is, if you can send us some information about the Bog Meadow to the clerk, and we'll get it to our attorney and see if it's the same thing. It may be the same answer, that we would just vacate it, split the road, and you have to establish a private easement. That would be my assumption, but I don't want to. We're willing to take a look at it. So if there's not a sense of urgency on this for you, then we can take another look at both access points and see what the story is. And I will offer too that we'll also review, because you questioned what development is. We'll take a look at that. I want to leave any questions unanswered.
What do you need to look at the Bog Meadow access then? You need.
If you could just get me a copy of the deed. I'm looking at the aerial right now, and it looks like they're just looking at Google Earth, which does, I think, get updated with the GIS.
Mhm.
It looks like that would be a logical and more appropriate access point. It does look like that there is a recorded easement area that goes through the two houses at the end of the subdivision. It goes through the lot that's probably the HOA or the common area, and then does give access to your lot. So I would think that would probably be a more appropriate location for an easement, for an access driveway improvements.
But if that was set up with intentions also for a roadway, and you vacate that, would that once again go to the neighboring properties? Or where the town retained?
I thought you had indicated that when the county sold you the lot, they recorded this easement.
They did. It's,
So I think it may be a private easement versus what, the public roadway easement that's off of Kalen Farm.
the way we interpret it is I have a private easement across town-owned property for future use.
Off of Bog Meadow?
Off of Bog Meadow as well as off of Kalen Farm. The town owns the property, but I have a right-of-way easement, which is recorded on my deed and the survey that the county completed with doing preservation. Because they indicated that they would have never preserved this farm without these there, because it was essentially preserved 16 feet. You can't do anything back there. They could never build a housing development. So without those, they said they would have never preserved it.
Why is the Bog Meadow Lane access not ideal?
It's all the way on the end of the farm at the bottom of the hill. And to bring in big equipment, you want a centralized access, so you're not driving across your crops.
Well, I'll certainly take another look at the Bog Meadow easement as well as the language in the Kalen Farm easement before
Okay,
I would suggest and recommend that the board, table this and we'll take a closer look at the language.
okay. I can forward you a copy of the survey and the deed, if that helps you. Forward it to the clerk, which can get it to you.
Yep.
That'd be helpful. Yeah. All right. Okay, then we'll table this until we get the deed and survey and make clarifications on those two access points. There being no further action to take in public, can I have a motion to adjourn?
Make the motion to adjourn.
Have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Very good meeting.
Good
Thank you,
night.
everybody. Thank you.
Good night.
Hey.
Good night.